Hello, this video will showcase the custom plasma repeaters I've made. And it will also show you how to mod the plasma repeater in Halo Reach. So I'll begin with the base plasma repeater. There's absolutely nothing different about this. This is just the base plasma repeater you would normally see in Reach. So now let's move on to the custom plasma repeaters. The least interesting one is this is just a worse carbine, basically. It fires and can headshot elites and other things. That's all it does. Now we have the slightly more interesting one. I created a brute variant. It has splash damage, detonates explosives, and has a projectile that's affected by gravity. So in theory, you can fire it up in the air and maybe hit something. Yeah, if there was cover there, you could use the arc projectile to get an advantage. And it has splash damage. The next one is the shotgun plasma repeater one. This is the worst shotgun you've ever seen, but it makes a cool light show. So I say it's worth it. It's literally just a shotgun, but plasma based. And finally, the most interesting one. The revolver plasma repeater. You charge it up, and it fires quickly. So yeah, those are all the custom plasma repeaters. Now it's time for the tutorial on how to mod them. So when modding a weapon in Halo Reach, if we want to modify the looks, we need to go to Objects, Weapon, and Rifle, and we need to go to Plasma Repeater. And to modify how it looks, we just need to focus on the render model. So, in the render model, we have multiple things. We have materials. And this is basically what gives the plasma repeater its color. So the mill shader, to demonstrate what the mill shader does, we can just take a look at one of the other plasma repeaters. It is literally just the mill between the shell. So this red part highlights it perfectly. That is what the mill shader modifies. Now if you want to modify the outside middle, that is called the shell shader. So I will demonstrate that here. We go to Plasma Repeater, Shell Shader. If we open this up, you will see it has all of this. Now to change the color, we just go to Specular Color, and we just select what color we want to change it to. Now, I should mention, ideally, you want to copy or at least have a backup of the plasma repeater before making any modifications to it. If you want to create a variant, you just copy the folder, paste it, and rename the things inside the folder. So we'll change that to red. And you should see it has this reddish color to it. But it's not like that. To make it like that, we just got to go to here, the albedo color, and also change it to red. I just picked the brightest red possible. And now we have a red plasma repeater. Now if you accidentally made a mistake and turned the base plasma repeater red, there's a very easy fix. We just click this cancel button, and as long as you didn't move this horizontally, you can just change it back to blue, and we will be left with a blue plasma repeater. And that is basically how you modify the plasma repeater's looks. One more important thing about modifying the render model is you will need to go to the variant that you created and go all the way down to first person animations or first person. And you will need to change the render model to the new variant of the plasma repeater you created. Now you don't have to do this if you're modifying the base plasma repeater. So if I'm modifying the render model of this plasma repeater, I don't need to make any changes because that plasma repeater already has that render model. But if I create a copy of it, I will need to change the render model to this. So here is how you modify the projectile of the weapon. So, to begin with, the projectile, you can think of it like this. It's physics-based. So our initial velocity and our final velocity, the thing that determines it, is the following. Acceleration range. So if I set this to like 50 world units or 2 world units, that means it will start with its initial velocity, and after it's traveled 2 world units, it reaches its final velocity. You can see here by the question mark, it even says what distance the range the projectile goes from initial velocity to final velocity. Now there is one other thing. That is the air gravity scale. It basically gives the projectile gravity. So whatever you set the value to determines how strong the gravity is. That is why when we fire this weapon, the projectiles arc. The other thing is the air damage range. Basically, it takes the damage of your projectile, its lower bound, and it starts from its highest value of damage to its lowest value of damage. Now, I believe this only works if you set the projectile to scale by distance. And the other thing are effects. This thing where it says attachments, this is where you'll find all of your effects. Now, it is important to remember if you create a variant of the plasma repeater and you want to change the projectile effects, it's really important that you set it to the plasma repeater group. It's very important that you set the effects to your variant. You don't want to just open this immediately. You always want to check to make sure that it says what you want it to say. Example here would be right here. So if we go to this plasma repeater bolt projectile, it should say plasma repeater brute effects projectile. If it just said plasma repeater, that would modify the base plasma repeater. So that is very important. Lastly, we have the damage effects. Now, the damage effects basically just determines how much damage it does and what category it is. So category determines what type of projectile it is. So plasma is typically really good against shields, but if we set it to a bullet, it would be less effective against shields. That's basically what category does. The next thing are all of these flags. Each of these do different things, and some of them are self-explanatory, like this one. It skips shields. However, some of them may not make sense. So forces, harpoon, always. What that does is it staggers or like stuns any AI, basically. In fact, I have this box checked on the plasma rifle, and we have an AI. So here we have an elite. I don't know what is happening. What? This has never happened before. Please ignore what just happened, because I don't know. But yeah, we have a plasma rifle, and we have an elite. As you can see, it seems unfazed. But when we use the plasma rifle, it causes that to happen. And while they're having animation, they can't fire back. That is what a charge beam is. The other things that this does is determines camouflage, which basically affects, does this weapon strip your camouflage away when firing? And I don't know what these do. The plasma repeater dot weapon, basically it just determines how the gun fires and what projectile it uses. So for example, here we have the plasma repeater revolver weapon. And if we go down, you can see I changed it to latch auto fire and had its prediction set to charge. I also give it an auto fire time and an auto fire throw. I made the action set to fire others so that the gun fires, and the primary action to charge so you have to charge it before firing. And rounds per second basically determines how many projectiles it fires in 1 second. And the rate of acceleration is determined by an object function. So I think I should mention that. Functions basically serve as telling it how the weapon functions, basically. So here, if we have heat generated per round, it has an input of 0.03. And if we think of it as a percentage, that is 3% until it overheats. So if we set this to 78 and pick up this variant, you will see that it will overheat nearly instantly. So that's how you modify the heat generated per round by the plasma repeater. Heat loss basically determines how fast the plasma repeater cools off. The rest I'm not entirely so sure. Age, I believe, determines the ammo. I'm not entirely so sure how this function works. And the chase fire spin, not entirely so sure what it does. But yeah, that is what the dot weapon file does, basically.